Hello, I'm talking to you today from Hope Church in High Wycombe, where we were worshiping before the lockdown occurred. I want to thank Pastor Julian for inviting me to present a thought for your worship, and I pray that what we're doing this morning will be profitable to you. Just a little bit of background. During the last quarter, a couple of the lessons touched on the book of Genesis, the creation story. And at the time, I was quite struck by some of the themes. I read a couple of books about the creation events, and I was struck by the themes that are there. It's rich. The first 3 chapters just have these really rich themes that run throughout the rest of Scripture. In fact, one of the commentaries I looked at said that there are only 3 chapters in the Bible: Genesis 1, 2, and 3. Everything else is commentary. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. The very first theme that you run into is the theme of light and then darkness. Let me go straight into it. Genesis 1, and by the way, all my texts are from the ESV, English Standard Version, if you want to follow along. Genesis 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. There's the setting. Then this is the first thing God does. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw that the light was good. And God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness He called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. If I can just jump ahead a little in my sermon and give you a theme that I want to touch on. Day and night have lessons for us. Nighttime, you can't see. Daytime, you can see because of the light. Then the story in Genesis continues through the creation stories, and it comes to the part where Adam and Eve fall, and they take us into the darkness, one that is spiritual to begin with, but also physical in that eventually it ends in the darkness of the grave, total darkness. So we have a picture then of the whole world descending and doomed into darkness. And this is true for humanity and for us as individuals. This leitmotif continues right to the end of the Bible. Listen to Revelation chapter 21, verses 23-25, how it ends. It says, "And the city has no need of sun or moon to shine on it, for the glory of God gives it light, and the lamp is the Lamb. By its light will the nations walk, and the kings of the earth will bring their glory into it, and its gates will never be shut by day, and there will be no night there." It's very powerful text. But you have the story of the great controversy from the Genesis, where He creates light, right to the end where there's not going to be any more night. And between, there is the struggle between light and darkness. If you were to look up in a concordance, the words light, darkness, enlighten, dark, shadow, you'll find just hundreds and hundreds of texts that you could spend a very profitable time plowing through. I've picked out a number that jumped out to me out of the pages, and I'll share them with you today. But this light is a dominant motif in the great story of the great controversy. In fact, let me read you from Easton's Bible Dictionary under an article entitled Light. He says this: "All the more joyous emotions of the mind, all the pleasing sensations of the frame, all the happy hours of domestic intercourse were habitually described among the Hebrews under imagery derived from light." I want to share a couple of books that have helped me understand this darkness in my life, in the lives of people. I'm not suggesting you buy these books, but this is the impact they had on me. The first one is called The Psychopath Test by John Rodson, who is an award-winning writer and documentary maker. He's the author of many best-selling books. He does a study of psychopaths. Now, I understand there are different terms, psychopath, sociopath, narcissist. I'm just a lay person. but I'm trying to use the term psychopath very broadly and in the way that I think Ronson seems to use it. A psychopath has no empathy, totally self-centered, cannot give love, and will do anything, everything, to deceive, manipulate, and even apparently do good to get a person to do what they want. Jesus' description of the devil as a deceiver, a liar, and a murderer from the beginning fits the description very well. After I read the book, I looked at the appendix. In the last part, there is a test. That's why it's called the psychopath test. And it's a test that apparently psychologists use when evaluating whether a person is a psychopath or not. I decided to take the test. And at the end, came to the conclusion that I'm a psychopath. That was just shocking. And I remember just wondering, what on earth has happened? I'm a psychopath. But then I began to speak to some friends and ask them, what do you think? Am I that bad? And one of the things that helped me, somebody said, Llew, you can't be a psychopath because psychopaths do not realize they're psychopaths. So if you think you are one, then you're not. And that was a great relief, to know that maybe I'm not a psychopath. But what I recognize that the roots of our brokenness and the darkness, lies in the darkness inside of our selfishness. And this darkness and selfishness is not eradicated, not in this life, or at least not mine, but it continues to reside inside of me. And this got me to thinking about what Paul was saying in Romans chapter 7, when he cries out, who will deliver me from this body of death? The second book that had a powerful impact on my thinking is by Scott Peck, and it's called The People of the Lie. Peck is a psychiatrist, and he was originally an agnostic, atheist, and then he became a Buddhist, and finally became a Christian. And he went through these stages because he was trying to find an explanation for evil, the evil that he found in deeply troubled patients. And he came to the conclusion that Christianity is the best way to understand and explain the evil, and particularly the phenomenon of demon possession. Peck will not refer to Satan with a pronoun. He always refers to Satan as it. He argues that this creature has become so deeply psychopathic, I'm not sure if you use that word, but so deeply self-centered that he's no longer a person who can relate with empathy and care. That's the first thing that really struck me. The second thing is that evil, including our own darkness, is not neutral. Evil isn't the thing you can say, I might do it or I won't. I can give or take. Doesn't really matter. It's not here or there. Behind the darkness is a power that reaches after us and pulls us back into its clutches. It is not neutral. Let me take that. Now I want to turn to the Bible now and to look at this theme of the power of light and dark and how it's woven all the way through the Bible. I want now to look at 3 texts that relate to darkness, and then we'll move to a number of texts that talk about light. Now again, there's so many to choose from, but these are the ones that struck me. The first one is when Jesus meets Paul on the road to Damascus, and I'm reading from Acts 26. I'll read verses 16 to 18. Jesus says, "But rise and stand upon your feet, for I have appeared to you for this purpose, to appoint you as a servant and witness to the things in which you have seen me, and to those in which I will appear to you, delivering you from your people and from the Gentiles, to whom I am sending you, to open their eyes, so that they might turn from darkness to light, and from the power of Satan to God, that they may receive forgiveness of sin and a place among those who are sanctified by faith in me. First of all, he uses two clauses, from darkness to light. But then there's a parallel phrase or clause that says, from the power of Satan, control of Satan, to the person of God. It's not from the power of Satan to the power of God. It's from the control of Satan, as it were, to the God, implying that our God is a God of freedom, God of light. The next text that I want to go to is Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12, where he says, "For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places." So again, he's got these powers that control the darkness. And then the third text is Jesus speaking to Peter in Luke chapter 22, verse 31. And Jesus speaking, he says, "Simon, Simon, behold, Satan demanded to have you." Demands. This is amazing that it demands of God, Christ, to have you, that he might sift you like wheat. But I've prayed for you, that your faith may not fail. And when you have turned again, strengthen your brothers. Peter said to him, "Lord, I'm ready to go with you both to prison and to death." Jesus said, "I tell you, Peter, the rooster will not crow this day until you deny me 3 times that you know me not." Afterwards, Peter goes out, after he denies Jesus, he goes out into the darkness and bitterly cries. And I wonder if the bitterness of Peter's weeping afterward is best understood in this way: "Lord, I let it. In all its lies, deceit, and hatred, I let it betray the life and light of my life. How deep is my attraction to that darkness?" All right, now let's move to passages to talk about the light, the good news. The first one that really struck me was this one in Matthew chapter 4, verses 15 and 16, and he's quoting from Isaiah chapter 9. Matthew says, "The land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, the way of the sea beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the Galilees, the people dwelling in darkness have seen a great light. And for those dwelling in the region in the shadow of death, on them a light has dawned." It's a beautiful, beautiful verse, a picture of sunrise. And I like the little word there about the shadow of death. It's Psalm chapter 23, isn't it? He's picking up these themes beautifully. Now, Isaiah refers to a light. John is going to expand this light and comment further. And I'm now going to John chapter 1, verses 1 to 9. "In the beginning was the Word." Hey, this is a commentary on Genesis 1. "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. The Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of man. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God, whose name was John. He came as a witness to bear witness about the light, that all might believe through him. Now he was not the light, but came to bear witness about the light. The true light, which gives light to everyone, was coming into the world." I think it's so beautiful. This major theme of light is a major theme in the whole Gospel of John. But here John starts by saying this dramatic picture of an amazing Savior stepping into our darkness, our dark world that he originally made light, steps into it as our light giver, champion, and redeemer. Let me show you some other texts from John. John 8, verse 12. "I'm the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." And there are wonderful little things about this. He says, if you follow me, if I'm the light in front of you, you'll see where you're going. Don't walk in front of the light. Don't walk before Jesus. Walk behind him or beside him, and you'll be able to see where you're going. You won't stumble in and fall, because I will be your light, says Jesus. There's a hymn somewhere, the lines, "Lead, kindly light." And that captures that picture of Jesus saying, follow me, I'm the light of the world. Then there's John 12:46. I have come into the world as light, so that whoever believes in me may not remain in darkness. Jesus is saying, we're all in darkness. We live in darkness, but I've come. And if you will believe in me, so there's a relational aspect to this light. If you believe in me, you will not remain in darkness. Listen, wisdom, insight, intelligence, freedom, joy, happiness, all come out of the light. It's dependent on a faith relationship with Jesus. And the result? 1 Peter 2 verse 1. You are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. This theme of light continues to run throughout the whole scriptures. And it's not simply physical light. Physical light is a metaphor of that deeper light. Here, let me read from Mark chapter 6, verse 22-23. The eye is the lamp of the body. So the eye is the lamp. It's not the light, it's the lamp. If your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? Listen to what Jesus is saying. If your eyes are healthy, you will see well because the light goes in. But if your eyes are diseased, such as age-related muscular degeneration, or cataracts, or glaucoma, you begin to live in darkness. That we understand that physically, all right? But this is true spiritually as well. If your eyes are healthy, Jesus says, and focused on good and mercy and gentleness, you will see well. In fact, everything we do we need to ask, am I living this and doing this in the light of mercy, justice, kindness, truth? Is that where I'm walking? Then you will walk soundly, Jesus says. But if your eyes are focused on greed, materialism, resentment, fear, and self, then you will walk around in darkness. And so, again, this is not referring to physical light. It's referring to spiritual. It's not these eyes, it's the eyes. Ephesians put it this way, Ephesians 1:18, having the eyes of your hearts enlightened. All right, let me take you to one more passage to complete our thoughts. It's from John chapter 11, and it's a story that you all will know well. It's the occasion of Lazarus' illness and resurrection. But I'm only going to deal with the first part, Jesus' interaction with the disciples, and show you what Jesus tried to say to them. I'm going to go verse by verse because what Jesus says is so dense in ideas that we need to look at carefully, because some of the words that he says seem counterintuitive to what he should be saying. So here we go. We start in verse 1. Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. It was Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his hair with her feet, whose brother Lazarus was ill. So the sisters sent to him, saying, Lord, he whom you love is ill. Then verse 4. But when Jesus heard it, he said, this illness does not lead to death. The NIV says, will not end in death. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Now, when you hear those words, and you knowing the rest of the story, think, is that the best thing to say, Jesus? It's not going to end in death? What are they going to think? We're not told who Jesus said those words to. But the book Desire of Ages suggests that Jesus says it in front of the disciples so they hear it, but it's a response to Mary and Martha and Lazarus. This illness does not lead to death. Now, think about it. To the disciples, they're going, and knowing what they are thinking about the danger of going back to Jerusalem, the area of Jerusalem, they're thinking, oh good, he's not going to die, so there's no need to go back to dangerous Jerusalem. But to Mary and Martha, it would have come as an initial relief. Oh, he's not going to die. But then as Jesus delays and Lazarus gets worse and then dies, I want you to think about what that must have meant to Martha and Mary as they thought, but Jesus said he wasn't going to die. Is Jesus wrong? All sorts of questions must have risen in their heads. And I wonder if when Jesus does come, if there's more behind what Martha says to him than meets the eye, when she says to him, Lord, if you had been here, he wouldn't have died. Desire of Ages says, when Lazarus died, they were bitterly disappointed. But they felt the sustaining grace of Christ, and this kept them from reflecting any blame on the Savior. It's a beautiful sentence, but it still recognizes that they must have struggled with that and said, no, Jesus cannot be blamed. Jesus, if you'd been here. Now verse 5. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Now the word so there feels counterintuitive. If you love someone who's ill, you go to see them. You don't say, oh, he's ill, so I won't go. So you wouldn't stay away, you'd go and see them. But Jesus said, so when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. And behind this statement by John, we can imagine again the disciples' thoughts. Oh, good, Jesus is not going back there. That would be dangerous, indeed suicidal. Remember Thomas's words at the end, let's go back and die with him. One of the books that I read when we were studying Genesis was a book by John Lennox, who's professor of mathematics at Oxford. And let me read you a quotation. He refers to this passage. He writes this, the disciples thought that if they followed Jesus back to Judea, it would be suicidal. They would be safe only if they remained where they were, and they're wandering around Galilee somewhere. To them, this was a matter of simple logic. The authorities in Jerusalem were out to get Jesus, so the safest place for the disciples, they thought, was a maximum distance from the capital, far away in the provinces. That idea came from inside their heads, of course. That is, they were relying for their guidance on a source of light inside them. Okay, now we come to verse 7. Let me read it. Then, after this, that is, after the 2 days, he said to the disciples, let us go to Judea again. Now, the disciples must have had to do a retake. What did you say, Jesus? Going back? See, in their minds and thinking, as Lennox said, when Jesus heard Lazarus was ill and decided not to go back there, they must have thought, makes sense. It's dangerous, suicidal back there. Now, 2 days later, Jesus does a U-turn. And you know, Jesus didn't have the internet or someone text him on WhatsApp or mobile phone to say, look, the Jewish authorities have changed their mind. So the only knowledge they have is the knowledge they had, which was it's suicidal to do that. No wonder the disciples then in verse 8 say to him, the disciples said to him, Rabbi, the Jews were just now seeking to stone you, and are you going there again? Here's the question, logical. And since Lazarus is not going to die, is there really a need to go back? And then Jesus says these very important words, and it's where I want us to focus and to finish today. It's verse 9. Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble because he sees the light of this world. Verse 10, but if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him. The words are kind of strange. And I don't think the disciples got it, because their response was, the logical Thomas, the questioning Thomas says, let's also go that we might die with him. I don't think they understood what Jesus meant until later. And the important thing for us today is, do we understand them? The disciples needed to learn something about Jesus and their source of light. And so must we. The disciples had 12 hours of light each day because they were dependent on a source outside of them. We call it the sun, about 94 million miles away. When it gets up, we can see. When it sets, we can't see and we stumble in the dark. Why? Because the light is not in him or in them, as Jesus says to them. You know, there are creatures like the simple glowworm, and there are some deep-sea creatures that can produce their own light, fluorescence, and they get about in the darkness by the light that they create. But you and I can't do that. Apart from outside sources of light, we are creatures of the dark. Ours is a daily battle against the darkness of our broken natures. Every day we need to keep our eyes focused on the light of kindness and gentleness and honesty. Where do you see that light? Of course, the light source. Jesus is the light of the world. Cara and I attend on Sabbath evenings Sabbath school class at Walla Walla by Zoom. And the lesson a couple of weeks ago was on being winsome. And I asked the question, I said to the lady who was teaching it, how often do we need to remind ourselves not to be judgmental, but to be winsome in our witness? How often is that when we're baptized, born again, that we are other-centered all the time? Or do we go back and forth? How often should I remind myself? And she paused for a bit, and then she said, well, about every 5 minutes. And I was struck by that. I went, wow. She sees that our self-centeredness is so deep, it's so embedded, that we need to remind ourselves every 5 minutes. If we want to be winsome, we need to remind ourselves of other-centeredness. There's an illustration I came up with. We are moons, not suns. As long as we're facing Jesus, we can reflect light and become the light of the world. And how amazing of Jesus to count our small and poor reflections of him as being part of his being light of the world. It's a joy for us, a privilege we have to be the light of the world. But like the moon, the light is not ours. It's always him. And the moment we put the world between us and the sun, the moon goes dark. And the moment we move behind the world and replace our face facing Jesus, we're in the dark. And we need to learn that lesson. And that is Jesus was trying to say to his disciples, you are afraid to go back because you don't have the light. It's not in you. But I go back because I am the light of the world, and I know where I'm going, and I'm not stumbling. It's a very powerful lesson to them, and I hope to us. And the challenge for us is for us to keep our eyes on Jesus. Recognize that if we don't, the darkness pulls us back, draws us back into our self-centeredness, instead of allowing us to be the light of the world. So I'm praying, may God bless each of you as you bask in and enjoy the light of his presence and reflect that sunshine to others. You know, I've joined a book club, and we were discussing which book to read, and somebody suggested the very latest, and I'm not even going to name it because I don't think it's worth reading, but the latest Booker Prize. But as they were talking about it, and one of the reasons they decided not to choose that one was because we read a book a month, and this is over 500 pages, or around 500 pages. And they said, look, the guy leading us said, I haven't read it, but it looks very long. But Booker Prizes are usually very good. So we issued another book, which I read, but then I thought, I'm going to go and look at this Booker Prize. I'm not sure if I've ever read a Booker Prize winner. So I got the book and I read it, and I was just disgusted by it. There was so much self-centeredness in it and so much immorality that I actually went, after I'd finished it, and in fact I missed a few chapters because it was just going on and on. But it was about 12 characters, who kind of equal characters, but it was about their lives and their trying to find happiness. I went to a review of the book, and this is what the review said. This book is about a society morally adrift, asking the wrong questions. Whose guidance shall I follow? That of my mother, my university, my partner, my peers, my feminist heroes? Which bonds will last? And I thought the review was excellent asking those questions because, as I said, these 12 characters, 12 or so characters, are all asking these questions. But none of them are asking the question, where will I find the light? And that's what you and I have to do. We have to focus on Jesus, the light of the world. I'm going to finish by reading a prayer for you. It's a song that we know, but I'm going to read it as a prayer. And it's from the song Shine, Jesus, Shine by Graham Kendrick. It goes like this. Lord, the light of your love is shining. In the midst of the darkness shining. Jesus, light of the world, shine upon us. Set us free by the truth you now bring us. Shine on me, shine on me. Amen.